Sometimes you feel like a fly on the wall and you can see everything like that. Sometimes you actually feel like you are right there. And that's more of, when your sort of astral body travels there. But you can still remote view psychically, because a psychic connection doesn't necessarily mean that you're out of body.
Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Linda Lang.
Hi, this is Linda Lang from ThoughtChange.com. We are exploring the mystical side of life once again this week. If you enjoy our conversations, remember to subscribe, share with a friend. Today, we are talking remote viewing. I have psychic and medium Theon Paulino-Filippelli with me. She is also the founder of the spiritual community EvolvMe. Welcome, Theon.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's so great to be here.
Theon, why don't you tell us a little bit about the EvolvMe community?
Absolutely. I really am a person that wants to help. And I noticed that in the spiritual community, there really just isn't a community. So as somebody that always wants to bring people together, I thought this was the natural next progression. And I started about 2021, started really developing it and creating a space for practitioners of all stretches of the spiritual realm, as well as the users. So I really wanted to connect people. I noticed that online there is a lot of difficulties finding practitioners that are truly honest. I actually just set out to find just the people that wanted to create a community.
It's beautiful, with a beautiful mission as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And you are a natural born medium.
Yes. Well, it's an interesting story. From the moment I could even remember, I would see people that had passed. And one in particular was my grandfather. And I had no idea that he actually passed away because of it. And I would tell my mother, oh, Grandpa said this. And she would get very upset and just say, oh, no, you didn't see Grandpa. But actually it took a couple of years before I actually realized in my head that he wasn't here. And because of my strict Catholic upbringing, I really didn't feel that was something that I was doing. I really pushed that down until a little bit later on in life when I had my son, who also had the same experiences, telling me about my grandfather and all of these things. So I just couldn't push that down for him. I needed to nurture him. So that really started me looking at myself and why I always felt like there was a piece of me missing. And then I started just to read every book that I can find, how everybody does it. And I ended up reading this book called You Are Psychic by Deborah Lynn Katz, just an amazing book of all aspects of intuitive development. And for me, I see intuitive development as more of an evolution. And this book spoke to that. When I reached the end, I noticed that she had a school. So I looked up the school. It's called International School for Clairvoyance. And I just absolutely loved Deborah. Now I consider her a very good friend and mentor, who is also the president of the International Remote Viewing Association, which is why I love remote viewing as well. I just feel that it is so important within your everyday life to utilize these abilities. It's funny. I make the joke all the time, but it's true. My husband at one point, 30 years in the technology industry, engineer, couldn't figure out a problem for a few days. And I said, well, let me remote view that for you. And 5 minutes, I was like, oh yeah, you just have to go to the fourth server down and you flip it up. And he's like, really? And he did it. And sure enough, that was the case. So there's a lot of practicality in this. I utilize it for every aspect of my life, as well as to help others. As a medium, I definitely want to give closure as well.
So are you telling us that everyone has the potential to remote view?
Oh, absolutely. Everyone is born with this innate ability. It is just like when you know when somebody's not right. When you walk into the room and you immediately know something bad just happened, that is your intuitive ability. And if we're all born with that, then we all have the ability to grow within in that understanding. And it's funny because especially with remote viewing, the US government sort of developed it. It originated in Russia. However, the CIA used it for psychic spying and for many years didn't call it psychic ability. That's why they call it remote viewing. But now we utilize this every day. In fact, I utilize it for psychic detective work, where we help people find lost people, pets, and help to solve mysteries and crimes and things like that. So again, another practical use for it, right? It is. It's amazing how quickly you can teach people to remote view. That's how we know it's this innate ability that we all have. In fact, I often go online and to a crowd will have them, teach them how to remote view, and they all pick it up. And not one of them has incorrect information. So if I can teach total strangers how to do it, then you know that anybody can.
What is it like when you actually go to another place? Is it almost like 3D for you, as if you were there, or is it more just like a memory or an imagination?
Well, it can come in all sorts of ways. Everybody is different into which ability that they touch on most. So some people will see more, some people will hear, some people will feel, or even just know. But the thing is, for me, I've spent many years developing it. So it's hard to explain. Sometimes you feel like a fly on the wall and you can see everything like that. Sometimes you actually feel like you are right there. And that's more of, when your sort of astral body travels there. But you can still remote view psychically, if that makes sense. Because a psychic connection doesn't necessarily mean that you're out of body, I guess. Right. So, yeah, it depends. I'll say for psychic detective work, I utilize remote viewing, but then I automatically switch into mediumship or clairvoyance during a session. So you're, using your analytical and your intuitive mind, which is difficult for some straight intuitives and psychics. But I've been able to sort of bounce between both.
I'm so curious about this. So sometimes you might actually have an address of a place where you want to view, but if you're, let's say, unraveling a mystery, looking for a lost person, you don't know their physical whereabouts. So how do you travel to where they are or where they've been?
You're getting me excited about all of this. I will say, so in a remote viewing session, either let's say if we're doing something for a lost person, we don't like to be what we call front loaded. So the only information I will receive at first is their image, right? So I will see their image and a question. There'll be a tasker who will say, where is their current physical body? And I very specifically say that because for a medium, they will view a situation and they'll speak to a spirit, but they may be a spirit incarnate that doesn't necessarily know. So when I ask for where is their physical body, I'm automatically connected psychically to where that physical body is and what's happening with it, whether it is, having coffee with a friend or unfortunately has passed. So I would say the energy of how it feels, I will start getting flash images and start hearing audibly little bits of words like forest or something like that, or get a flash of the experience they had. So let's say somebody's running or hiking or something like that, I will immediately feel the energy of that and then like automatically sort of go into either their spirit body, their space. And I can definitely see, feel, hear the space around me. So if I'm targeting a person that is lost, let's say hiking, which is oddly a common thing that happens. So definitely take as many things with you when you go hiking. But, I will say, okay, I can see the forest around them. There's a stream and then, stuff like that, right?
But do you actually know like where they are? Could you pinpoint that, say on a map for the police?
Let's say they're lost in the wilderness, right? And there really are no landmarks around, right? So everything looks the same everywhere. We could pinpoint their last known location, right? And it's called map tapping. And so as an intuitive, I will go over the map and start tapping it with my fingers. And it's like, it's that connection that you have. And for me, I will start feeling like, okay, in my stomach, in my gut, that there's something wrong here. So I'll say, okay, look in this area of this, one particular part. So yes, in a sense, you can do that. The original remote viewing, they would give you coordinates, which can be difficult because actually at the time that they were starting remote viewing and developing it, they didn't really have proper coordinates at the time. They would often get things completely wrong. So it is better for the tasker to say, okay, well, I need you to do this and only this, right? So it's like, where is their current physical body? And then after you've done that session for that, then either you go further and it's called psychometry. So you'll get a piece of almost like how a dog sniffs. They give a dog like a shirt of somebody that's missing and they can find it. We have the same abilities, right? So if I were to hold like an article of clothing or jewelry or something like that of that person, I can immediately get impressions of where they might be. So there's all these different techniques that go within, let's say, helping to find somebody that is lost. Like I said, mediumship, or let's say if it's a crime or something like that, you can focus on either the victim or the assailant. Or let's say they escaped jail, right? So where are they now? You go into their energy and you can kind of pinpoint where they are. Yeah.
Fascinating, fascinating. So let's say you wanted to check in on your senior mother or maybe your kid at school, see what they're doing. Is it actually in real time when you remote view, you're seeing what they're doing right then and there?
Well, first I want to say, always ask permission. And I know you would. I wouldn't remote view anybody that isn't in danger or that hasn't committed crime without asking first, right? There's no time and space. We see time as linear, but in reality, there is no actual time. So I can remote view past, present, and future events. So let's say my son, I want to make sure because he was having a bad morning or something like that, obviously I would say, okay, do you mind if I see you? Yeah, I would connect with my son, which would be easy, right? And your mother, right? To then just connect with her energy. So you just focus on that image of her. You can even hold an image. It's like psychometry of that person and just focus, and then you ask yourself, where are they currently? And then typically you start getting impressions. Whether you're not a visual person, doesn't matter. People visualize differently. Some people think that they're not visualizing because they don't see the pictures, but in a sense, there's that part of them that actually does understand and view it, or you'll start hearing things. The trick is to write down everything that you get. And then for remote viewing, we have this two sections. One is called adjectives, like where your descriptor words, and that's the ones you want to stick with. And then AOLs, which is analytic overlay. So the thing about remote viewing is you want to break down every detail of an object or a person down to its most basic sense. So, a cell phone would be rectangular, metal, electronic, black screen, because we also have to get out of our minds, because the problem is that our minds will never tell us the actual truth of anything. It will give you what you need based on your conditioning or understanding of things. Those are the basic steps in the beginning of remote viewing. Once you have it down, you kind of already automatically do it. once you've broken that down that much, you go back to it later on, right? So that's why it could be hard for people, because some of these sessions can last days, but you break it down and then you go back to it. So why did I do that? Within a session, I will pull that image back up, and I will even imagine that I'm holding it, even biting it, like shaking it to hear it, stuff like that, where you start like getting impressions, because it's really just about getting out of your head, and your intent being to view a particular object for a particular reason, right?
What happens if you're not particularly visual or clairvoyant? How do those messages come?
Well, we are all clairvoyant and we're all visual. And it's just like anything else. You're building a muscle. So I definitely would never want to say that I was not. And maybe this is why I kind of opened all of them up so easily, is that I never want to say that I'm not really visual or I'm not this. But if you at the time are not, you'll start hearing, you'll start feeling it, almost like sometimes where your heart starts pounding. So you just focus on, why is my heart pounding, or why is this happening, or what are they saying? So sometimes, you'll hear like the person like say something, like, because you just flashed in on a moment there. And so you go back to it. So why did they say that? And then you'll start getting feelings about it, and it starts coming in as a knowing, right? And you write it down anyway. The thing about it is you don't question it as it comes in, nor as it goes out. That is the most important thing. You were there just to dictate, take notes, right? And once you take yourself out of it, the ownership out of it, of what you have to do, then it starts opening up even more, right? When you start to analyze a situation, or like focus in on one particular, let's call it hit that you get, you just want to be open, because intuitive ability is not about trying. And it's the opposite of trying. It is allowing, releasing, and trusting. And that's definitely difficult for a lot of us, which is why many of us don't believe that we are intuitive. In fact, I'm actually working on a technique for mediumship to help people connect a little closer. I've been doing marathon readings on this and getting people that don't even know what a chakra is. And, all of that really actually getting pictures, hearing things. And it's wonderful to see. As a teacher, that is my joy, is to watch people just go, oh my gosh, this is it. I got it. So, and that happens really quickly. It's just about changing your mind on what you can and cannot do. And I will say, there's not much we can't do.
Yes, indeed. Open your mind to new possibilities, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It took me a long time to really wrap my brain around this, because as a devout Catholic, I was, against this. I had been told that's wrong. And what I come to find is that it isn't. It is us just empowering ourselves. And perhaps we look at why somebody tells us not, why somebody, tries to keep us down that way, because it isn't. If we were given these abilities at birth, and probably beforehand, if we were given these abilities, then how can it possibly be wrong?
Theon, can you share a story with us of one of your experiences where you remote viewed and it was really accurate, or you solved a mystery?
So one, we always say, is that we don't solve the mysteries, the police do. And we are just there as their guide, there to help them, to assist them. But there have been quite a few occasions. I am one of those people, because I am very detail oriented. I am like a bulldog with things. So I have to make sure, especially when it comes to somebody in danger, right? So let's see. A lot of it is difficult, because I'd have to get into some details about crimes that have happened, but I'll give you sort of a scenario, I guess, right? So at one point, I've been working with Pam Coordinato, who actually is one of America's biggest psychic detectives. And she actually had a show called Sensing Murder. So I went through her courses, and now I'm in her, like, she has advanced students that just repeat all the time. And then she gives live cases to as well. There was a woman missing and they didn't know where she was. Immediately, I saw her outside of her mother's house and knew that two of her kids, well, actually, at first I saw one and I said, wait, there's multiple kids, were staying with the grandmother, and then another child was in the back. I then saw her car, the color, everything, and that three men came up, one of them being her husband, pulled her out, and she was missing for a while. It was a horrible situation, unfortunately, because there was a kid in the car. And that was a concern because I believe it was like 4 days, they couldn't find either of them. But I was able to see each man that was involved and their facial features and, their size and everything. I knew that it was of a jealousy thing. Sadly, I also felt the pain of being attacked and the mother's pain for leaving her children. So, it turned out very much what happened. And I believe her body was found 4 days later. Yeah.
It's got to be hard as a psychic to kind of tune into the energy of things like that. How do you cope and keep your spirit light and your heart open?
Well, definitely use humor as much as you can. One thing is that it is very difficult. There are some things that some of us just won't see. For me, it's children. I have children. And one thing I cannot see is any trauma to a child. So recently there was a child that was missing, which I knew immediately. He had passed early on. I could not see his face. So it was literally blank. And it actually sat with me for a while. I ground, I go outside, especially when it's extreme as this one was. Yeah, I do a lot of meditation and clearing. And I also understand that that child is not going through this trauma anymore and is now in a much better place is what I've seen. And then it's always my mission now to make sure that person gets caught. So it really is just a process, but it does take a toll in some ways. But as long as I know that I'm helping, I feel good about it. So yeah, you can't be human without feeling for other people. And especially with the work that I do is in service of other people.
That's not the only use of remote viewing. It can be used for many other things.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned before, I often help my husband with work projects, right? So if he has an issue or if he wants, let's say, to understand a person, like, oh, well, I'm having a meeting with this person. Can you kind of gauge how that's going to go? I can do that for him. And one great thing was my cousin was frantic. She just had moved to Nevada and her dog ran away and she was panicking. I was like, don't panic. And immediately, because I felt her panic for this dog, I just shot right into that scene. And I'm like, she's running around, she's on this street and she's a little dehydrated, but she's okay. And now I see her walking into this shop. I think it was like a machinery place and there were people working. And I go, oh, and there's somebody that is looking at her and is giving her water and is going to hold him there. And I told her the building and the sign and everything. And she ran right over. She goes, oh my gosh. Listen, there's one thing I always love to say. I will never lose my keys again. Remote viewing is helpful for many different things. It's a great exercise, especially if you want to know about like, okay, well, I am even looking at a house, what is the area around there? Because sometimes when you actually go into a location, so much is going on and you're starting to get, you get a lot of noise basically around you. So you sometimes don't necessarily feel how the energy is until later. That can help you with buying a house, let's say, and going and projecting, yourself, I guess, or your spirit self over there to feel out the situation beforehand might be a really good idea too. So Yeah, so many uses. If you can think of something, you can do it. Remote viewing.
Do you think that pets, like dogs and cats, could see you if you're remote viewing, or perhaps even a psychic?
It's so funny. This is a joke with me and the others in the community. One of my dogs specifically, and especially because, there's animal communicators and things like that, but dogs are psychic, especially ones that are very attuned to you. I go for very long meditations. I have to. So my dogs are always right next to me. And I know when it's time because in my meditation, I'm just kind of clearing and I see really just nothing. And I actually visibly see his energy in my space. So he'll pop up. I'm like, okay, I guess it's time to go. It's not me, it's more him, that he is coming into my space knowing what I'm doing.
For sure. Pets are very energy sensitive.
Oh my goodness. Yes. And what's funny is there was a speaker in one of these workshops that I went to recently that talked about how we have the same ability to smell just like animals do, but we don't recognize it. And in order to develop it, it is to focus on it, do breathing exercises where you smell and then identify everything in the room and then just keep doing that like as a practice. And there's a woman, she was able to smell that her husband had Parkinson's, and they were like, no, there's no way. So they did a study on her and they gave her, I believe it was 10 shirts, right? Some known, some unknown. She got every single one of them but one. And they said, well, he doesn't have Parkinson's. A few weeks later, they found out he had Parkinson's. So it was even pre, his diagnosis. Well, let me clarify that a little bit better. He had just had a yearly. So he had no sign of it. They did testing. And maybe it was a couple weeks later. Maybe it was like more like a month later. He got the diagnosis that he had Parkinson's. So yeah, for her to be able to do that is incredible. And we all can do it. It's really just where your focus wants to be. If we can do things like that, what else can we do? This is why I'm on this perpetual mission to kind of wake people up to this, because it is so important to empower yourself. How often do people get sad and depressed and feel like they, really don't have options in the world? I know for me, running a technology and security business for 17 years prior to this, that I often had panic attacks, stressed out, and couldn't really get a grasp. Like I said before, I felt like something was missing. And because of that, it sometimes really disrupt who I was. I sometimes couldn't even leave the house. Once I really empowered myself with this knowledge and really I certainly dived into it. I just understood things better. And I didn't have that fear. When you have control of who you are, then decisions and other things make it that much more easy, right? And it's funny because you think about it like this. When I see people, or when we're stuck on something, or when we have a hard time, we so rarely want to seek help for it, right? Developing your intuitive ability, empowering yourself is one of those ways where you start really opening up to everything, opening up to those possibilities as well as your own capability, right?
Beyond what you would even consider possible, really.
Oh, absolutely. Every day I find new aspects and new things to dive into.
Absolutely. Theon, it's been a real joy having you here today. Where can we send people who want to know more about your work, mediumship, remote viewing?
Absolutely. Well, you could find me on evolveme.com. So it's evolve without the E at the end, me.com. And you'll see me all plastered all over that place. Yeah. And I also do a show called The Paranormal Mediums, which is on EvolvMe's live stream, Facebook and YouTube.
Thank you for being my guest.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to this week's edition of Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. You will find all of our conversations on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. Come visit me at thoughtchange.com, pick up your copy of Learning to Listen, and while you're there, check out my program, Alchemy from the Inside Out. Time to bring a little magic into your life. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.